Hi, folks. So, I wanted to talk about the very public and nasty spat between President Donald John Trump and Elon Musk. I just want to share my limited perspective on that. Several people have had their opinions about it. And I must say that a lot of my friends that I've spoken to about this thing, almost universally, all of them hate Donald Trump. So it's very difficult to have conversations with people who hate someone and who have this notion about him that I don't think is founded on reality, but that's fine, that's what it is. But I also found that a lot of black people have these very weird notions about Donald Trump, which is fine. I have my own issues with Donald Trump that I disagree with. I disagree with him on very few specific issues, and they are very strong, strong disagreements. But I wanted to start by saying that Elon Musk is right and he is wrong. How is he right and how is he wrong? He's right on the criticism of the big, beautiful bill. He's right on the money on that. Because this bill, what the United States of America has a, a deficit of $36 trillion. $36 trillion. And they're adding 1 trillion of deficit every year. This is actually incredibly insane. And a lot of people thought that, including myself, that the efforts of the Department of Government Efficiency were actually going to bring back government spending to sensible levels, cutting down all of the spending and all of the stuff, unnecessary spending that they were spending on. That was a hopeful effort and gesture that a lot of us supported. I shared my views in terms of where I disagreed with Dodge in terms of the approach in which they were taking, in which they were laying off people without giving them sufficient notice, treating people as if they are just disposable. I made a video about that. You can check it out in one of my videos. I think I made a video about that like a few months ago. I'm gonna try to link that video if I find time in the description of this video. But if you look at, for instance, military spending of the US, which was up until recently was $800 billion, they just increased it to $1 trillion. And the question really is why? I mean, firstly, you don't have the money. So everything that you are increasing spending on, it is debt. And therefore, why are you increasing military spending? The US is already spending more on the military and on its defense than the top 15 companies all combined. When I say top 15 companies, meaning if you have the chart of defense and military spending per country in the world, and we have number one in terms of the country that spends the most, which is the US at the top. And then you have number two all the way to 20. As a matter of fact, you can take number two all the way to like 16 or 17, add all of their spending. It will still be less than what the US is spending. So then the question then is, why? What is the purpose of it? Because if you are spending so much in the military because you are preparing for a possible war or conflict with China in the future, or Russia, or China and Russia, or maybe other enemies that you have, say China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, take all of those countries' military spending, put it all together, and then say, okay, potentially, if it happens that India side with these guys in a war, add India there as well, even though it's unlikely, but say it happens, And then even if you say, okay, it's possible that Africa also will join these countries, take all of the countries in Africa, add their military spending as well. Why is all of that military spending, China, Russia, India, all of Africa, Iran, North Korea, why is that level of military spending not sufficient? Because it could be argued that all of your allies in Europe, you can take all of their military spending also and say that it is on your column because whichever war happens, you know that these countries are going to side with you. You can even include the spending of Australia and New Zealand in that. You can even include Japan to that as well. So the question then is that what is the purpose of all of this spending? Why are you spending so much? But also the fact is that you're spending so much and you don't have the money to doing this. You're borrowing. You don't have it. You are literally putting the future of your kids at risk. Why are you doing it? What is the purpose of it? So when Elon Musk saw that and 6 months of his life that he has dedicated to doing this thing, okay, let's just say 5 months or 4 months, 4.5, and they passed this bill and Trump is willing to sign it to. I mean, I understand, I mean, he lost it. I understand why he lost it. And I agree with him on that. Let me just stay on this before I talk about on what respect is Elon Musk wrong. I'm just going to stay on this issue of the U.S. spending deficit and all that stuff. If the United States of America continues in this fashion, they will also become an empire, empire that is no longer the greatest empire in the world, the way that the British Empire was, the way that the Greek Empire was, the Roman Empire was. If they continue in this fashion, they will be supplanted by China and others in terms of being the largest economy in the world and in being the largest military also in the world. China already has the largest navy in the world while they are spending less money than the US on the navy. So you understand then therefore that spending does not necessarily result to end up. I mean, I know some arguments where people say no. The reason why they're spending so much is because the way that the U.S. trains its soldiers, whether it's in the Navy or in the Marine Corps or whether in the Army. The amount of money that is spent per soldier and the level of training that they have per soldier in terms of when you're looking at an individual American soldier, the equipment that they have on them, the capabilities that they have on their person is uncomparable. I mean, I get that, but at this rate, also, even if that's the case, but can you afford it though? $36 trillion in debt. $36 trillion in debt. And so, I mean, if you're looking at military spending, they just added $200 billion to their military spending. That is half the economy of South Africa. Because South Africa's economy is $400 billion, which is very small, which is the size of Indiana. There's not a single African nation in the world that has an economy that is as large as the US military. Let me repeat that. There is not a single African country that has the economy. I'm talking about the entire economy of an African country being the size of the American military. All of them, their individual economic sizes are smaller than the size of the US military spending. And it's the same story with a lot of other countries in Asia and in South America. And the point for me is, what is the point of all this spending? The United States will spend itself to bankruptcy That's really what is going to happen. Yeah. And that's one thing that Elon Musk is really concerned and scared of and scared about. But then what he is wrong about is that Donald Trump is the duly elected president. If you disagree with him, I think it's sufficient for you to say you disagree, which is what I disagree with as well, and to maybe properly delineate and explain why you disagree, where you disagree, what your concerns are, and then just leave it at that. The nature and the way in which he started going after the president personally, having personal shots and insults, accusing him of having his name on the Epstein files, calling for him to be impeached, all of that stuff. That is when he actually crossed a mark. He crossed the line there. Because it is sufficient for you to disagree and say you disagree and leave his government if you cannot work together because you disagree. Which I understand, he didn't leave the government because they were disagreeing. He left the government for other reasons, from what I'm understanding. But even if he left because they were disagreeing, that is sufficient. It's sufficient to agree and to disagree and to just leave and to share your mind on the points of disagreement. When you're starting to make these personal insults and attacks, that is really way for me, regardless of who the person is on the other side, whether it's Trump or it's Obama or it's whoever, man, whoever, Macron. Leave these personal insults. It really poisons the personal relationships, because when you disagree with someone but you are not insulting them, there is a chance that in the future you might be able to find some ways also of collaborating and working together in the areas where you agree on. But when you are making personal insults the way that he did, it makes it very difficult for you to be able to work together again. But it's also just unseemly, and it's childish and it's immature. And I was very disappointed in Elon Musk with regards to that. But I'm very glad that now this thing has tapered off and simmered down, because it was not a good look. But I think the damage has already been done. It is, folks, this should be a lesson for all of us, just like in our pressure, in our own professional lives, that if you're having huge disagreements with people, move in such a way that it does not destroy relationships. That is something also I'm learning personally. I'm not saying that I'm great at that. I've made a lot of mistakes in my own professional life when I disagree with people, colleagues, superiors, and all those situations. But we need to find a way to handle disagreements in a manner that is constructive and healthy. And if we can't really find each other, it's rather leave it at that, as opposed to having personal jabs and attacks on someone that are going to make relationships incredibly difficult. That is where I say that Elon Musk actually was wrong on. But on the facts of the bill, why do they spend so much time saving money for government spending when it's time to pass a budget? The Republicans are not going to codify all of those savings into law. What was the point? What is the point of all this exercise? That means that the entire Dodge team has been wasting their time, wasting their lives there to try to save money, when the Republicans are actually just going to continue to spend at the levels and even higher levels that the Biden administration had spent before. That's just not something that is good and encouraging for people who've been spending so much time trying to find ways to save, and then you you treat them like that. It's just, it's not okay. It's not okay. But let me know what you think. What are your thoughts, comments below? Thank you.